Good evening, everyone. This is Donald again. It is Wednesday, April 29th, 2020. How's it going? Welcome to the second episode of the MOD podcast, or the MOD is short for the Musings of Don. Couple of quick announcements. Thanks to a suggestion from someone on Facebook in one of the groups I participate in, I've actually publish this podcast on anchor.fm. If you're looking at my YouTube channel, you'll see the URLs on the right-hand corner. It's anchor.fm/TheMOD. That's TheMOD. It's also been published to Spotify. So if you're a Spotify listener for music and other things, but you don't mind listening to podcasts, feel free to look for me, and I'll be there too. Feel free to subscribe. Would love to have you following along. So, what am I talking about today? I had talked about in my older version of the podcast, and even the podcast recording last night, that I'd be asking a bunch of questions, hopefully get some participation. We're going to change up the format a little bit today because I was listening to something on the news and then it clicked with something I had been reading about, so I thought I'd share. What's the topic? The topic is rewriting reality, or if you're watching the news, rewriting history. Not one to really get into the whole politics and media and types things, so I'll just keep it broad in terms of what I heard on TV. But for those who obviously been following news of the coronavirus or COVID-19, whatever you want to call it, right, there's people who said, there's the reality that, X amount of Americans have been infected, X amount of Americans have died, and by all, reality, things have not gone well. Yet our leadership in the government likes to, quote unquote, rewrite history or rewrite reality, and said that they've done things successfully, done whatever they needed to do in a right way, etc., etc. So I'm not going to judge whether our government's done great or whatnot. I'm not really here to talk about that. But as I listen to the news people talk about the certain people's attempts to rewrite history and rewrite reality, it kind of brought me back to something I've actually read about in a book about rewriting reality in the last couple of months since we've been on our lockdown. So let me give people some context. So during the early part of our lockdown, probably I want to say maybe toward the end of March, when we first, at least here in the San Francisco Bay Area, when we first started the shelter in place, I was reading a few books. One of the books I read was something called The Charisma Myth. The author is Olivia Fox Cabane. If I remember her background, she's like a coach, career coach, or speaking coach of some sort. And I found her book at some point, maybe a couple of years ago, when I was trying to, find some materials on how I could improve my speaking skills. Because, my job, day-to-day job, when I'm employed, at least for the last decade or so, is as a sales engineer. So as a sales engineer, you're speaking a lot over the phone, right? You might be speaking to people in person. So, you're always looking ways to get better in how you speak, how you present. Right, there's physical stuff, mental stuff, etc. So I've had her book for quite a while, and I've read a little bit of it, but since I had time, I was unemployed, I'm at home, I started going through back her book again and reading some of the techniques and stuff that she was offering. The book is good. I fully recommend it if any of you guys are, doing public speaking, doing sales regularly. A lot of good techniques there. I won't try to summarize the whole book. There's a lot of material there. But I will focus on the point I brought up right now, which is rewriting reality. So with the rewriting reality technique that she's talking about, the context is she gives an example of, let's say you're going to drive to make a big sales presentation, speech, whatever the case may be. And then you get cut off by some lady on the freeway while you're going to the location where you need to speak. And for most of us, our first reaction when anyone cuts us off, man, you might be mad, you flip them off, whatever the case may be. And you know what? You might be entitled to flip them off. But, when you get all angered and everything, it does throw you off your rhythm, and you don't want to be, for example, angry when you're trying to speak in public or do a sales presentation, whatever the case may be. So, but it's a difficult thing to kind of get off feeling angry, right? Because, like, goodness sake, our first assumption is people are acting stupid. But one of the things she said she learned, the author Olivia learned from a class, she doesn't claim that it was something she figured out herself. She learned it from somewhere else, that people can, quote unquote, rewrite reality. What's that accomplish? Well, by rewriting reality, that helps you settle down and get refocused on what you need to do. But what does she mean by rewriting reality? Well, means instead of looking at the situation that hurt, someone cut you off on the freeway on the way to your presentation, and thinking that the driver was just being stupid, something intentional. Imagine that it was some person who was rushing to get home or get somewhere because maybe her child had gotten sick, or some other situation that was less bad as we thought. And if you think about it that way, if you think about the fact that that person was feeling kind of hurried because darn, her kid was sick, you naturally calm down, and you might come around to being in a better state of mind when you're doing your presentation. So some of the suggestions she had is forgetting about that kind of wild, like someone cut you off thing. I've had to deal with it too, but her example is she had a big presentation to do in front of some people in a foreign country. She had to speak in a foreign language, and she was nervous. She could not sleep. She woke up. She was like, man, this is going to go bad. But then what she ended up doing was rewriting reality. She thought about, okay, what's some positive things that I'm getting out of this, out of this whole stress thing. I'm not sleeping. I'm not able to relax. She started writing down that, hey, maybe things will go well. I'll be able to get the speech done. Everyone will love me, et cetera, et cetera. So she, instead of thinking of all the negative things that could occur because she couldn't sleep, she started writing down all the positive things that could happen. And, in her book, the way she wrote it, she said ultimately her presentation ended up being very successful. And in fact, while I didn't necessarily do that particular technique, I mentioned in some of my older versions of the podcast that I've been interviewing for a job. And I wrote in some Facebook posts that the interview process was stressful. And the 2 panel interviews I did, one of them I had trouble sleeping. The other one I was just somewhat stressed out. I didn't rewrite reality per se. I did some other techniques to kind of calm me down, and I actually was able to focus and get through it, right? And I think I did all right. I'm still waiting to see what's going to happen from a job offer perspective, but at least I got it done, and I felt like I didn't trip up or didn't struggle. But it's an interesting technique for people to think about is, we do all tend to focus on a lot of negatives. But, when it comes to rewriting reality, right, you're not rewriting history like what we talk about with our leadership in our country, but it's just really rewriting reality from a mental perspective to get yourself more focused on what you're trying to do. And so, I thought that was kind of interesting. So I thought I'd share this with people because, there's folks, right, some friends I've talked to who had to do presentations and stuff, and they get nervous. And, I'm like, what, other people can learn from this technique as well. So, and then I won't get into why our leadership's trying to rewrite reality. I think that's another thing about media and stuff. I think what they're trying to do is way different than what we're trying to accomplish, or what I'm trying to accomplish personally from a job perspective. Anyways, so that is my podcast for today. I actually, let me end with this. That since I published the podcast publicly to, Anchor.fm and onto Spotify, I've actually gotten motivated to do more of these because I think it'll be fun to share my thoughts. And one of the reasons why, just for folks who may be listening for the first time, why I named it The Musings of Don, I couldn't think of another name, was I don't really have one particular topic I want to talk about. Like, I love a lot of different things, but, I jump around a lot. So I figured musings, I'll just talk about any topic that comes to mind. And you know what, having the news today intersect with stuff I read in a book, I thought it would be interesting to share. So hopefully you'll agree, and hopefully you've learned something. Feel free to, if you see this in any of the platforms, send me a message, drop me a comment, wherever it may be. Love to hear from you. If you have any suggestions for topics you want me to talk about, I can definitely go into things if you guys want to. All right, guys. Thanks a lot for listening. Have a great time or a great rest of your week. I will catch you next time. See ya.